So there's a lot. I just finished with Matt Smith this holiday, and we are now in Peter Capaldi. I'm about five episodes into Peter Capaldi, and I have officially gone full circle. 2013, I watched about 20 minutes of Doctor Who with Matt Smith, and we came to that episode about 5 days ago, and I was able to look at it and go, yeah, this is the episode I saw. I remember this. So it was really a monumental moment because that was in 2013, and then January 2016, I finally decided where I was going to start, and I went back to William Hartnell, and we went through Patrick and John Pertwee, Tom Baker, Peter Davison, Colin Baker. Well, now I have to go through them all. Sylvester McCoy, Paul McGann, Christopher Eccleston, David Tennant, Matt Smith. So for me, it isn't just I'm done with Matt Smith and now I'm on the next character. It's very much a full circle. It's definitely I reached that point where I remember this is where I started. This is where it all started. I don't know. I don't know. Matt Smith is my favorite. Absolutely my favorite. And this is I'm of all the doctors, I'm literally in a depression. I'm grieving Matt Smith. I'm really struggling moving on to the next doctor because I just miss him. And I've been analyzing why. I was watching I believe it's called Doctor Who Confidential in England. I'm not sure exactly the name of it, but it is news and updates provided by the characters, where they sit down, they interview the actors. They had Peter Davison on, and they had two other people. Sarah Jane Sun was there, and they were asking, "What's your opinion? Where do you stand? What's your favorite doctor?" It's like the line. What is your favorite doctor? Who of the or who of the 12 actors is your favorite? And I cheered. I like whooped when Peter Davison announced that it was Patrick Troughton, and he said something, and his answer, I definitely want to amplify what he said. He basically explained that of all the doctors, Patrick Troughton had the hardest job, and he did. Oh my God, did he? But for me, it was. This was just they didn't have enough time to cover a full discussion, so that's what this is. William Hartnell, when he came on, this is what Peter Davison was also saying, is when William Hartnell came into the show, they had no clue they were planning on doing regeneration. It was just William Hartnell, and it was supposed to be an educational lesson on the history. It was literally a let's teach children history. That's all Doctor Who was. And then it caught on. There was science fiction that got brought in. Suddenly they're chasing monsters, and it's like the science fiction Scooby-Doo kind of a setup. Just phenomenal. Sherlock Holmes, Scooby-Doo, and science fiction satire all thrown into one. Suddenly they're chasing monsters, and there's science fiction, there's satire. It's just wonderful what it evolved into. But by the time Patrick Troughton came in, they had already established this is the Doctor. So and what Peter Davison was saying was that he came in having to adopt this role and redefine it. Now this is where my 2 cents comes in. William Hartnell had a very, very straightforward, this is his character. Very serious, very older gentleman. Very much, you can almost see him sitting in a leather chair in front of the fireplace reading Shakespeare. You can definitely see that with William Hartnell. So for me, Patrick came in like a whirlwind. He just blew me away. He was just so... There's a thing with psychologists where they've analyzed a person's personality. Everyone is made up of all different parts, and each and every one of us is a combination of all those parts. And it is quite possible to take each and every personality and set them aside and pull them into sections, and we all are just a combination of all these personalities. And this is really what Classic Who was. Classic Who is the individual personalities. You have the very serious side, the quotable Shakespeare side of the Doctor. You have the really goofy, zany side of the Doctor. You have the very witty, sharp side of the Doctor. And Tom Baker came in with those three personalities and combined them into his own personality, and then added his own flavor in this, which I think is why Tom Baker is considered the most loved, most popular of the Doctor Who characters, is because first of all, he had 7 years with the role, whereas everyone else had anywhere from literally 1 year up to about 4 years. Tom Baker had 7, so he spent the most time with the role. And I think that allowed him to really reach a depth of the character that no other actor was able to reach with the character. But in addition to that, he turned these individual personalities into a blend, and every actor thereon brings in this new dimension, this new variation of those basic three personalities. For me, those basic three personalities is Patrick. I adored Patrick. I adored his humor, his sweet, he was just such a sweet, sweet side, a very gentle, almost a child to him. It was definitely that. And this is really true no matter what. When you sit down with the Doctor, there is very much a childlike air to him. Patrick was the archetype of that with the Doctor. And when Patrick left, I cried. I cried. I missed him. 5 doctors later, I was still crying, going, I miss Patrick. I would see a doctor and I would just go, "Wee!" If it were Patrick. Everyone else, it was like, hey! But Patrick just brought in I really, truly missed his character. I loved his comments, his shirt, everything about Patrick was just perfect for me. When David Tennant came along, and there's like a whole, I have to go back with David Tennant because there's like a whole section with him that I missed, which absolutely changes my opinion of David Tennant in his portrayal. But going on to Matt Smith brought him back. I felt like I was looking at Patrick's performance again, and I felt like I hadn't seen him since February of 2016. I felt like I had an old friend back who I hadn't seen in so long. And suddenly I was in this 4-year roller coaster all over again with this zany, crazy person. Matt Smith was just, he encompassed the second Doctor. So for me, it was a massive flashback to somebody I adore. But at this point in the Doctor's life, he was darker, more hurt, more broken. And Matt Smith delivered. He really brought that darker side of the Doctor, which you don't really see with Patrick Troughton. So it was this wonderful, childish, my favorite line, and it just keeps running back through my head, is when Amy says to the Doctor, yeah, I waited. Now I grew up. And he looks at her and says, yeah, I can fix that. And that they all resemble very much a very particular part of the Doctor. They very much all resemble something with the Doctor. And I think we choose our favorite Doctors based on how well we relate to each and every one of them, which I think is why we have so many different variations. It's not so much that the show as a whole teaches us. Maybe that's not true. Maybe that's definitely true for others. But for me, it's that each Doctor teaches us something. And for me, the one who really rang true the most was Patrick Troughton and Matt Smith. And I think part of my issue with letting Matt go was because I felt like it really was too premature. I was not ready to let him go. I also, knowing that I lost Patrick back in February and I had to wait a whole whopping 10 doctors before I could see him again, I'm going, okay, am I going to have to wait another 10 years before I see him again as well? I was just nowhere near done with Matt Smith. So it's funny because when I first watched, it was in fact, and this cracked me up, it was in the episode when when Amy gets left behind and she ages and stays behind to fight while there's like two different parallel worlds going on, two different time zones. So she is 50 years in the future, and she's experiencing a very prolonged lifespan, while Rory and the doctor are experiencing mere minutes. So for them, an hour has passed. For Amy, 50 years has passed. And she lashes out at the doctor. She says, I hate him. That's where I came in, is when she said, Doctor, I'm here and I'm waiting. And then she talks about how much she hates the doctor. That's the part where I walked in, and it cracked me up because of all the episodes with Matt Smith, with all the episodes of the doctor. This is one episode where the doctor stays inside the TARDIS. He absolutely is uninvolved, and he sends Rory out to go take care of things for him because he can't leave the TARDIS. In addition to that, this is the other flip of all this, is Matt Smith is very much a toned down, right to the point, focused 100% to keep Amy alive. So there's that balance as well, which just cracks me up because you have this flip side. It could not have been more of an undoctored episode than that particular episode with Matt Smith. So that I found very ironic. It's really hard. I whenever a doctor ends and the next one comes on, I'm very open-minded and I'm very, okay, let's see what's going to happen next. And this is the first time I'm going, I don't care what happens next. I want Matt back. Now, that being said, I'm still watching, of course, and I will watch to the end, no matter what. I will watch to the end. And it's funny because we're going to switch over to Peter Capaldi for a minute. And this is something that you will not get unless you have seen William Hartnell. Coal Hill High School, Coal Hill Secondary School, is the high school that you see in the very first episode. Let's take you back to the first episode, The Unearthly Child. There are two school teachers, Barbara and Ian, who are talking about their problem student, Susan. She's unusual. They've contacted her relatives to have a meeting. Her grandfather. The grandfather evades and will not discuss anything with them. They keep reaching out. Barbara and Ian both are getting fed up. In fact, it's an English teacher and a math teacher. And they go out of their way to track down Susan and follow her. So they follow Susan to Totter's Lane, from Coal Hill School to Totter's Lane. And they go behind, there's a large gate. They go into the alleyway, and there's a bunch of storage. And among the storage is a police box. And they see Susan slip into this police box. And they stop Susan briefly. They talk to her. And this old cranky man comes out and starts yelling at them. Miserable miser, just a miser, just miserable man. And they start arguing with him, and he tells them to mind their own business. And they're like, no, we're concerned about her. After a brief argument, Barbara bursts into the police box to confront the grandfather, and it's bigger on the inside. He explains that it's a time machine, and they get very, no, it's not. He's like, well, fine, I'll prove you wrong. So he flips a switch, and they go off on their adventure. And then it's Barbara, Ian, the math and English school teacher, paired up with Susan, the student, and the grandfather, who turns out to be, of course, the doctor. So I'm watching this episode now with Peter Capaldi, 53 years later, and there's Clara and not Ian, Danny, and I'm just going, this is way too familiar. It was definitely a play on, a contribute almost to that very first episode, Unearthly Child, and right down to the English and the math teacher. It was really, really interesting, and I was analyzing this with my husband, and yeah, absolutely, it is a tribute to the first episode. And Peter Capaldi is very much an encompasses the essence of what William Hartnell was. He really captures that first Doctor. Now, here's where we all respect the first Doctor. He was the first. We all respect William Hartnell in such a way that he was the first. He started something that just turned into what this would become. We respect him like we respect Leonard Nimoy. Now, that aside, I don't like the way he portrayed the character. The Doctor was not the Doctor at that point, the Doctor that we would grow to love. It was very much a stiff old teacher giving his direction, and we're like, okay, it was not at all what the Doctor would become. And I think that's another reason why I love Patrick so much, is because Patrick breaks out of that. He comes in like a whirlwind and just says, okay, we have to redefine what we're working with here. I have to be as absolutely opposite of William Hartnell as I can to establish we're not going to do this anymore. We're not going to do that school teacher lesson to be learned here with history. We're going to switch this over to science fiction. So Patrick came in like a whirlwind, completely reset the dynamic. So in that sense, you could almost say that Patrick was the first Doctor because of how he, and I think this was his performance. I think this was the writers. I think this was the writers, the producers. I think it was the performance that Patrick delivered. I think that's why they cast Patrick, is because they needed something so extraordinarily opposite from William Hartnell. So, and it's interesting because here I am. I get done with Matt Smith, who is very much Patrick, and now I'm at Peter Capaldi with William Hartnell and Todders Lang, and I'm looking at it going, okay, we just worked backwards. And more than ever, as much as Patrick was a breath, just a whirlwind of fresh air from William Hartnell, Peter Capaldi is this massive. I miss Matt. It's really different. It's really different, very different. It kind of, yeah, they have definitely worked backwards. So now I have to go, well, where's that midpoint? Because that would put David Tennant comparable to Jon Pertwee, and he's not. Oh, good God, he was not. David Tennant was not Jon Pertwee, which would put Tom Baker with Christopher Eccleston. Oh, no. No, Tom Baker was definitely not Christopher Eccleston. I have to go through this now, which would make Paul McGann equivalent to Peter Davison. Not at all. And then we are looking at Colin Baker, the Sixth Doctor, paired up with Sylvester McCoy. So that would be the in-between group. That would be the, and so no. It's only with the William Hartnell, Peter Capaldi, Matt Smith, Patrick Troughton that definitely pairs up. So you feel like you've gone. It's really the beginning of the end. It really is. Which again has me going, okay, are they planning on wrapping up the series? And good God, I hope not. Good God, I hope not. I want to see this episode, this going on 150 years in the future, and I have so much to say about Matt Smith, and the problem is, I went through and I got my episodes crossed because of the Christmas specials. I didn't realize they weren't in order, so I watched all of David Tennant, skipping all the Christmas specials, skipping the finale and the introduction from the transition, the regeneration. I missed it. So the last thing I saw with David Tennant was The Next Doctor, with a man who had his mistaken identity. And then Matt Smith was there barreling through England, hanging onto the TARDIS in the air. I had no clue what had happened between point A and point B. So then I watched all of Matt Smith, and we got to the very end of Matt Smith, and I literally stopped watching Doctor Who for 4 days just so I could hang on to the last episode. My husband insisted that we watch it, so I watched it, and then we found out that, and I knew the last thing he said was, I will always remember the time when the Doctor was me. I will always remember when the Doctor was me. I knew that was his last line. So when we started up, suddenly Peter Capaldi's coming out of the TARDIS, and we're like, whoa, this doesn't make any sense. We must have missed something. So we went back to our Wikipedia list, which we hadn't looked at since Christopher Eccleston, and we went, oops, we missed like everything. So then we spent the day watching all the Matt Special episodes that we missed, watching all of the David Tennant episodes that we missed, watching the Day of the Doctor, watching the David Tennant saying goodbye, I don't want to go, his regeneration, watching Matt Smith coming in going, I got legs, I got legs. And then you see him crashing. So we had those transitions plugged into place. But in so doing, it completely altered the way I looked at David Tennant. It completely altered the way I look at Matt Smith. So I'm going to end it here. I have to go back, and actually I've already done it with my children, where we've gone back to Christopher Eccleston and we're watching now Everything in Order, because David Tennant is part one, Matt Smith is part two. And to really understand what happens to Matt Smith, you have to go back and understand David Tennant. And it's really, yeah. So, that being said, I'm going to go ahead and close here. This is going to take a lot of piecework to get this all together. That being said, I'm not going to say goodbye to this one.